Senator Sinclair, thank you for taking time to speak with us. Why are you picking this particular time to move into this new role of mentor?
Well, you know, with the COVID-19 pandemic and the inability to travel to Ottawa and limitations on movement generally, I began to think about the challenges that were facing Indigenous communities who wanted to move into self-government. And one of the things that people I spoke to talked about repeatedly was that they wanted to begin to develop their own legal systems and their own laws, and they needed help to do that. And even the lawyers that they were consulting often didn't know how to take advantage of their own traditions, cultures, and their own legal systems that have historically been around, and in some cases have been dormant, but in others are still quite active, particularly in the West Coast. And they just want to know how to bring that into the modern times and start using those traditions and those systems that have stood them in good stead for so many years. So when I was talking with Sonny Cochrane, who's one of the partners here, about this problem, he indicated that he had a young Indigenous law firm with about 18 lawyers, and half of them are Indigenous, and that he thought that the opportunity to mentor them, to prepare them for the future, was a good idea. And also at the same time, I had been speaking with the Law Society of Manitoba about developing some training modules for them to use for their compliance with Call to Action 28 of the Truth and Reconciliation Report. And so it just seemed like a perfect fit at this time. The Senate will not be sitting for a while, but when the Senate does call, I'll be, of course, going back there. And this will not be a full-time position. It'll be one where from time to time I'll come in and work with the young lawyers and basically just help educate them about legal systems.
And Harold Cochrane compared you joining his firm to Wayne Gretzky joining the team. What can you bring to the rink, so to speak?
Well, of course, my years of experience as a lawyer and a judge within the legal system, as well as my years of experience in the Senate, I think given me a perspective of how law works and how law could work, but also over the years, particularly during the Aboriginal Justice Inquiry and during the TRC, I participated in preparing reports that talked about the existence of pre-existing legal systems that Indigenous people had been utilizing for thousands of years before the arrival of Europeans, and how that had been denigrated by the Canadian government, particularly by Canadian society generally, and suppressed to the extent that it was no longer available for them to utilize. And with the advent of the discussion around the elimination of the Indian Act, now the question is going to be, what's the nature of the legal systems that Indigenous people are going to be able to utilize? And I think that in order for them to be able to do it properly, they need people who are able to talk about both the Western legal system as well as the Indigenous legal systems that they will be bringing to the table.
How do you expect to fulfill your duties as both a mentor and a senator? Will you leave the Senate?
Eventually I will. There's no question of that. I told people when I was going to the Senate that I wanted to do it for about 5 years to see if I could help the Senate grow into the kind of institution that it was meant to be from the outset. But my heart was always in the law and understanding the law and figuring out how to get the changes brought about in the legal system that were needed, but at the same time to assist young Indigenous lawyers. I did a lot of lectures and still do lectures at law schools across Canada, but more importantly, now I see the need for young practitioners, whether they work for Indigenous clients or whether they work for industries that are in contractual relations, negotiations with Indigenous clients, to understand how Indigenous thinking works when it comes to legal questions.
With police shootings in the news, how dismayed are you that the recommendations of the Aboriginal Justice Inquiry that you co-chaired and the Royal Commission of Aboriginal Peoples have been ignored or forgotten?
Well, they can only be ignored for so long. Systemic racism now is at the forefront of everybody's thinking and understanding what systemic racism is and how to deal with it, and put it into not only perspective for ourselves, but put it into a place where it no longer functions so influentially with institutions like police, the justice system, and Canadian society, is now part of a dialogue that we need to have. And so for that reason, I think that this step that I'm now taking as part of my own career will help to contribute to that conversation significantly, because now we're going to start creating a body of Indigenous legal thinkers and Indigenous practitioners, or practitioners generally who are not Indigenous, who will have an understanding, a better understanding of how Indigenous people will want to have their own legal systems, but in many cases how they want the existing legal systems to function. That's in their best interest as well.
Senator Sinclair, thank you for taking the time again to join us here today.
Well, thank you for having me, and thanks for your interest.